Now, the last leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, has been laid to rest in Moscow. Gorbachev died on Tuesday at the age of 91 after a long illness. Crowds lined up to see the former president lying in state. But Gorbachev was not given the kind of funeral usually held for former leaders.
Saying goodbye to one of the most influential leaders of the 20th century. The man who brought the Cold War to an end was not given a state funeral. In fact, the ceremony was more notable for its absences. President Vladimir Putin too busy to attend. And Western leaders didn't travel to Russia as Moscow's invasion of Ukraine has soured relations. The last Soviet leader was given an honorary guard. His daughter and grandchildren looked on as a relatively modest funeral went ahead at Moscow's Novodevichy Cemetery, a place where many prominent Russians lie buried. Earlier, thousands of ordinary Muscovites queued up to pay their last respects at the Pillar Hall, where Gorbachev's open casket was put on display. The hall normally serves as a venue for state funerals. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban also attended, the only European leader to do so. So many well-wishers turned up, the ceremony had to be extended by another 2 hours. While Gorbachev was revered as a hero in the West, many in Russia blamed him for allowing the Soviet Union to collapse and for the economic turmoil that followed. But most here today spoke well of him.
He made an attempt to build our world in a different way. Maybe not a very successful attempt, but he tried.
He tried to give us freedom, but we slept through it. We didn't manage to keep it. It's sad that we have so few of his kind.
As Gorbachev is laid to rest, the old Cold War divisions that he brought to an end are rapidly returning. The phrase, voiced here by many, is that it's the end of an era.
Well, earlier I spoke to writer William Taubman. He spent a lot of time with Mikhail Gorbachev and wrote an extensive biography of him. I began by asking him what Gorbachev was like.
He was a very charming person, a decent person. When we talked to him, my wife and I, who both speak Russian, he was natural, informal. He didn't demand our questions in advance. He didn't demand to have his own interpreter present. He has a wonderful sense of humor. We liked him as a person.
And what did he regard as his greatest successes and defeats?
His greatest successes, well, he ended the Cold War with some cooperation, of course, from Reagan and Kohl and Mitterrand and Thatcher, but he was the key man in that. Without him, the Cold War would not have ended. He also established the foundation for democracy in Russia, free voting, a genuine parliament, freedom of speech. Of course, he did not consolidate all of these changes, and by the time he left office, the Soviet Union collapsed. So although it was a noble, idealistic enterprise, in the end, it did not succeed.
And what do you make of the fact that such a major political figure was not given a state funeral?
Well, it wasn't surprising because we know that President Putin has no use for Gorbachev. In fact, he thinks that Gorbachev was responsible for the collapse of the Soviet Union, and Putin is engaged in reversing all of Gorbachev's achievements insofar as they still exist at all. So it wasn't a surprise, and yet I think it's a very important event. I've noticed that thousands of people have lined up to pay their respects to Gorbachev, and you know what that amounts to? It amounts to perhaps the last massive demonstration that Putin will allow, a peaceful demonstration in support of Gorbachev and democracy and freedom in Russia.
And again, the West has clearly a very different view of his legacy. Why do you think there has been such a stark difference in how he's viewed in the West and in the former Soviet Union?
Well, he stood for what he actually did not want to call Western values. He wanted to call them universal values: freedom, democracy, peace. And that's why the West appreciated what he did. On the other hand, Russians experienced the troubles that his reforms led to in their own lives, on their own skin. That is, the economy got worse instead of better. The country became polarized. Nationalism and ethnic separatism exploded, tearing apart the Union itself. So I understand that a lot of Russian people, Soviet people, felt that he had failed them. On the other hand, I wish that in retrospect they would understand that if he had not tried, their lives would probably be even worse.